I'm J. Keith Swiney. I'm founder, president, and CEO of Motivation, Inc. I've been around housing now for over 32 years. My forte is affordable housing, but I've literally done it all. I love it, and I specialize in development management, restructure, believe it or not. Someone asked me a question, what is restructure? Restructuring is reorganizing. Over the years, we have a lot of agencies and property management companies who are running way too high on their costs and expenses, and my job is to come in and make them better. I do stabilization and recovery. For all of you folks who are converting to RAD and now find yourselves in the tax credit world, you might want to keep my name and number handy because trouble is on your horizon probably, and we do a lot of those deals. I also, of course, do contracting, have done that for many years, consulting, of course, and training. Love training. As a firm, ladies and gentlemen, we are 28 years old. We are a true faith-based professional consulting and compliance firm. And to that end, I always give the disclaimer. The fact that I may say something related to or indicating my faith has nothing to do with you. Please don't take it personally. I am not trying to recruit you. I only want you on the pew next to me. So let's be clear. It's all about me, having nothing to do with you, but that is who and what I am, and that's what guides me. And by the way, that's what brings me to you today and you to me. So let's not discount it. We are the only firm in the country that has the only true Section 3 compliance software system that manages compliance. And by the way, I didn't mention it to the residents in the first session, but all of these changes that HUD has proposed, we already programmed them in over the last year because we got wind that they were coming. Of course, we specialize in fair housing, sexual harassment, customer service, leasing, resident employment readiness, and skills training. So for residents, we do a lot of work, but for you all, we do as well. And of course, Section 3 compliance services, including our national certification courses since 1997. So literally, ladies and gentlemen, since 2010, we have provided training to more than 42 of the Housing and Community Development Association around the country, consisting of more than 84% of the United States. So I guess, honestly, I can say I know more about Section 3 than most anybody. And some days I wonder if that's the right answer, but it's where I was led. Few housekeeping tips for you. Again, the call is to cover a high level of the proposed rule and its components only. This is not a training. It's not feasible or intelligent to try to do a full training on the questions via the webinar, as I've described in the lower right-hand corner. For those of you who just came on, I will address as many of those as possible. Again, the event is being recorded. I don't know what you see on your screen for those of you who are on the web, but on mine I have a red button that's flashing up in my upper right-hand side that tells me that it's being recorded. My team has confirmed it. We will make those available for you all as well by email blast. We'll make sure we try to get those out by Friday or close of business for sure, okay? And absolutely at no cost to you. To answer the question that I have gotten so many times, and I will do my best to make sure I cover this simply. The short answer is when the final rule actually becomes a rule, yes, we will be doing on-site training. As much as I believe there is some mechanism for training or doing events like this by web, I am now a buyer in that particular market. I think it does make sense. Section 3 is highly technical, and whatever that exact final rule is, when it's actually finalized, I will be in front of you and I'll be there to answer your questions and interact with you and help you to figure out exactly what needs to change in your organization to make it possible. The locations that you see on the scene, ladies and gentlemen, are regional targets only, and they are subject to change. Based on the time of year that we're looking at when the final rule comes out, the affordability to attendees to come to certain locations, and of course my schedule dependent upon the time of year, all of those things will dictate how that happens. But I did want to clear that up because I have gotten so many questions on it. Yes, we will be there. One of the HUD people said to me yesterday, boy, you were ready for this. I said, you got to be kidding. I've been waiting for it for 22 years of the last 24. Yeah, we've all been ready for it. And so we've been planning this day a long time, and I'm glad it's here. So here we go. HUD is throwing out the current rule completely, 100%. If you've read through the proposed document, you will see nothing that looks like the 24 CFR Part 135. That goes away, and the regulation will now be parked at 24 CFR Part 75. Two new categories of Section 3 persons have been added. They are referred to as Section 3 workers or targeted Section 3 workers. Please don't ask that question yet. The answer is coming. Don't bother typing it. I can save you on that one. The thing that you do need to know is HUD is considering, and this is going to be a little confusing, so I'll slow it down. HUD is considering two alternative compliance approaches. Inside the proposed final rule, they have specifically asked that you all, in your comments, let them know which of the two alternatives you think is the most feasible or the best for you. You can only answer based on what's best for you and your agency, but I will go through them as they have different things. I'll talk about them as we go through it and help you to understand it and certainly answer questions. Alternative number one equals labor hours. So alternative one is all about labor hours. Alternative two deals with new hires. Much of the same way we deal with new hires right now, it's kind of, do you go with the new labor hours or do you go with the old new hire rule? Based on your comments again, HUD will decide which option it will go with initially. Be cognizant of the fact that HUD may change these in the future. The one thing you're going to notice is that there are two documents in this proposed final rule. One is the rule. The other deals specifically with benchmarks. The purpose for the benchmark separate document is so that HUD can make the changes to these benchmarks, which deal with either alternative one or alternative two. And they can do that anytime or within every 5 years if they choose. So defining the labor hours and the alternatives, here's what it looks like. Labor hours means that a Section 3 workers must work 25% of the hours of the total labor hours. 25% of the total labor hours. And targeted Section 3 workers must work 5% of the total labor hours, or both. Now, when we say total labor hours, what the rule is saying is that includes the total hours for all of you folks in public housing, all of your staff people, all of your vendors and contractors. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Give that some thought. New hires means 30% of the total new hires for Section 3 workers and 5% of the total Section 3 new hires. So, or both again. So when you look at this, you're looking very much at the new hire rule that was old, except for that 5% of the total Section 3 new hires for those targeted folks. But when you're looking at the basic hours versus bodies, and that's really what we're talking about, the hours that would work versus the human bodies, you will notice that HUD spent a crazy amount of time in the dissertation, in the preamble to the rule, actually explaining every logic that surrounded each decision. And the one thing that HUD makes very clear, I'd heard this from them for many, many years, and they wrote it very clearly, I believe, which is the number of bodies can be manipulated. For example, they say you could have one person work a whole year, or you could have a person work basically, and I'm just going to paraphrase this, 1 month of that year, 4 times. The 4 times game gets you the ability to count that person 4 times as 4 new hires under the current interim rule. Under the proposed rule, they're saying, no, we would much rather go to hours worked because we believe that you cannot manipulate the hours worked by these Section 3 people, but you can still manipulate the number of bodies based on how we define it. So please be careful in your comments and give this some thought and rationalize it a little bit deeper. And again, we'll talk about that at the end of this event. There are some exemptions. For all of you small agencies, all of you that are under 250 units, congratulations, you are exempt from the benchmark requirements. Benchmark requirements are the safe harbor requirements. You only have to conduct what they refer to as reasonable outreach for Section 3 businesses and people, I'm paraphrasing, and only report their quote-unquote qualitative efforts. Meaning, if you're in some small town in the middle of Texas like some of our clients are, and you only have 14 units or 20 units or 24 or 30 units or even 120 units, you don't have to deal with these number of hours versus new hires. None of that affects you. All you have to do is basically say to HUD, hey, here's what we did to give people notice of opportunities. Those were our qualitative efforts. HUD has not defined qualitative beyond what I just said. There is no actual description, no true definition of what qualitative means, but I can tell you verbally, I was told very clearly they would love to have just given me a pass 100%, but the statute doesn't allow it, so this is the best they can do. HUD says in the proposed final rule that they will prescribe to you all later. For you small agencies, they will prescribe to you a mechanism for reporting these qualitative efforts. That is different than the benchmarks that everyone else will have at 250 doors or above. Now, I'm going to drop this in because I feel like I need to. The proposed rule didn't cover this, but I have gotten a lot of questions. Someone asked, which is an intelligent question, by the way, what happens if under a RAD or Section 18 conversion, my unit count drops in the middle of a reporting period? Then what do I have to do? The short answer is ask HUD. I don't know. The proposed rule does not speak to that. And by the way, I think in your comments, it would be very smart for you to ask the question because there's so much conversion going on. Public housing is disappearing by the minute. And with that happening, many of you all who are right there on that bubble, you're going to drop pretty quickly. So if you took out a 200 or 300 unit property and it's your last or near your last, you could very quickly get to this number where you're under that for public housing. I have a client right now, one of my best clients, who quite frankly is there now after their last, demolition. So please give that some thought. Will you have to comply with the old or the new? I don't know. For community development recipients that receive less than $200,000 annually of total HUD funds, you would be exempt. Now, again, I do want to stress, I know that I have many of you on this call who are actually community development people. You are not public housing folks because everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people registered for multiple of these sessions. Great, I loved it. You should know something though. The rule also doesn't clarify what happens if you are a subrecipient from the state or county and someone else awards you the less than $200,000. Already you would have been exempt, but under the current system, you still have to report. What happens in that scenario? That's a question you all should be thinking and asking as well. And of course, as you see in italics, and generally when I write something in italics, ladies and gentlemen, it's because it's not written, and this is a comment from Keith Swiney. Though not written in the rule, public housing, I have been told, still has a $0 threshold. You may wish to comment to HUD and ask them for clarity. I truly believe it was an oversight. I can easily see how everyone's sitting in the room having this conversation, working on this document, and just everybody nods their head and say, no, public housing is already covered. Let's not worry about them. Let's move on. And nobody remembered to write it in the actual document that public housing had a $0 threshold. Now, why am I covering that? Because of this one reason. The way that the rule reads would make one believe that the $200,000 per project threshold was for public housing. So I absolutely know why many of you are probably sitting back there shaking your heads right now. That's the reason why. I had to make a phone call. My source very clearly said, no, no, no. Public housing always has a $0 threshold. It's in the statute. Well, that's great. How many of you have read the statute? Next, priority for opportunities. Section 3 workers now. Let's define these folks for you. Section 3 workers are a person whose pre-employment income is below the HUD published income limits based on eligibility for assisted housing. So whatever the income limits for eligibility, meaning for acceptance into any of these HUD-assisted programs, is at that moment that you are considering whether or not this person is a quote-unquote Section 3 person, worker. I hate to use that term. I don't like it. Persons whose pre-employment income, meaning they are unemployed, and then when they become employed through a Section 3 initiative or contract, they would have to go through this process. Here's the problem. Inside the proposed rule, it does not clarify what happens if the person was previously or currently employed when they got this opportunity. So to automatically make an assumption that their pre-employment income was below is one thing, but what if they have been working and maybe they're just looking to make a transition into the trades, for instance, and they want to get out of restaurant management? Yeah, as a restaurant manager, they might be making good money and may not have qualified. And by the way, they still live in public housing. I can point that out to you based on the way that, over income works today. So it's very easy, and we have dealt with this many times in our 22 years of doing this stuff, that you have people who are just trying to transition. This needs to be cleaned up a bit, in my professional opinion. Number 2, the person must reside in a qualified census tract based on the Bureau of Census data at the time that you will need to look up to confirm that they reside within the qualified census tract. That qualified census tract may be outside of an area that you are traditionally calling your service area. Number 3, a worker employed by a Section 3 business. Yes, question came up in the first section. So you're telling me anybody who works for a Section 3 business is automatically Section 3? Yes. The answer would be yes, based on this definition and based on the way in which the Section 3 business definitions are written. We'll see those in just a moment. It goes on in multiple places, and it says prior arrests/convictions shall not negatively impact the business owners. Right? All other applicable laws apply. So if you're dealing with a Section 3 person who's also a business owner, you can't take that information and impact it. Number 5, the worker must be qualified for the job. I think every one of us agree that makes sense. Targeted Section 3 workers have a little different definition, and this is exactly what's written. Targeted Section 3 workers are current public housing or Section 8 assisted housing residents. So current, and the word current is specifically used, current public housing or Section 8 assisted housing. Number 2, residents of other PHA managed projects. So anyone else who resides in any property that is managed by that public housing that is expending the funds, they also are second tier. Number 3, current youth build members. In the questions at the end of the rule where HUD is asking you specifically to give comment, ladies and gentlemen, there are 9 of them. Some are quite lengthy, some aren't as lengthy. This is the shortest one, dealing with youth build. It says current youth build, but HUD also asks you to give comment on whether or not past youth build members between the ages of 16 and 24 should also be added into this tier structure. Number 4, for community development, ladies and gentlemen. This is your top tier now, but this is my 4 on the list, but this is for you all purposes. Workers employed by Section 3 businesses. Again, same assumption. Everyone who works for the Section 3 business is Section 3. I really don't know how they got to that. I will not lie to you. I don't know where in the world that came from. No part of that makes any sense, and I can prove to you it doesn't because I have Section 3 businesses we've helped to create who hire people who absolutely are not defined as Section 3, period, end of story. For community development, lastly, residents living in your service area and youth build are your last two categories. We will talk about service area. Trust me, it's coming. Next. Section 3 businesses. Now, this is where you can begin to say, are you kidding me, Keith? All right, because remember the definitions of Section 3, these Section 3 quote-unquote workers. So 51% owned, any business, 51% owned by a low or very low income person is top tier, Section 3 business. Number 2, any business that has over 75% of all labor hours performed for the business must be performed by low and very low income persons. 75% of all labor hours performed for the business. Now, in as much as I appreciate where HUD is coming from, I would have proposed something similar, but not quite. But I get what they're trying to do here. They're saying we want to give this priority to a company that really works a lot of these low-income people. The problem is that the rule does not define total labor hours for all employment in business or just for those Section 3 related contracts. That needs to be clarified. It is not in there, and that needs to be clarified. Again, maybe it was an assumption that as a Section 3 business, you only apply or you only meet that definition on a HUD-funded Section 3 covered contract. But the problem is it says of all labor hours performed for the business. Those are the exact words. That means it takes into account all the work that they may be doing down the street at Walmart and at Buffalo Wild Wings. I mean, how do you calculate that? So that's important. And number 3, owned, meaning the business must be owned at least 25% by a current public housing resident. 25% by current public housing residents. I will again address the question from earlier already because I know you all are thinking it. Wait a minute. So a public housing resident who doesn't own their business in the majority, but they do live at the site where the work's being performed, as a business, they're the third tier? Yes, that's correct. So any business, whether it is by a public housing resident, a HUD-assisted resident, or non, according to the way it's written, so long as it's owned at 51% by low or very low income persons, it receives highest preference. Wow. Again, for the community development service area, I want to make clear, because again, I know the proposed rule is a bit confusing. I don't think they meant it to be that way, and I've written a lot of crap, so let me tell you, it's easy to just start making assumptions. The more you work on something, you almost think that everybody knows it, and you don't think it through. This is confusing. So this component only applies to community development monies, not public housing assistance. And heck, if I turn out to be wrong on that, then they really need to rewrite it. But that's the way I've read it in everything they've written. I've seen that. Here's what it says. Starting from your project as the center point, you will draw a 1-mile radius around the project. Assuming you are able to capture 5,000 total population within that 1-mile radius, you're okay. That becomes your service area for that project. However, in the event that you are not able to capture a 5,000 population number in the 1-mile radius, you then continue to draw out that radius until you are able to capture 5,000 people. Now, let me go back and remind you about the $200,000 community development threshold for a moment. And I know this is about public housing, but let's not be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. Under the wide world of RAD and redevelopment as a rule, even a Section 18 redevelopment, they all do the same thing. you bring in a developer or you act as your own developer and you start tapping into every source of funds you can find. And oftentimes people end up going and they tap into those home funds, or they'll tap into CDBG dollars, whatever they can get their hands on. And when you do that, now you're bringing in these different programs and different requirements. So even for you folks in public housing, pay attention, because unfortunately, the proposed rule doesn't do a very good job of stipulating when we're mixing public housing assistance and community development. I'll explain a little bit below. The reason I think this becomes a major problem with this 1 mile radius is one thing. I said it earlier, and I actually got feedback. Somebody sent me a text and said, "You're funny." And I don't mean to be funny. I really don't. But I'm telling you, this is the way from a programming standpoint. Remember, we have this massive Section 3 compliance software. So when I read this, I'm looking at it strictly from a compliance, can you do, how do you do, and how much does it cost perspective. My programmer said, "Keith, this is easy. We take the address of the project and the address of either this person or that place or what have you, and that becomes our radius." But she said, "Remember, Keith, that is how the crow flies." Meaning the old expression, the crow doesn't go turn left at Main Street, turn right at 2nd Street, turn left. No, it doesn't do that. It is not Waves or Google Maps or whatever. This regulation doesn't clarify. In that 5,000 population and in that 1 mile radius, based on directions and driving or based on how the crow flies, both will be very different things, render two different results. By the way, why am I making a big deal out of this? Because in the document, HUD actually goes through this and talks in depth about people driving and how far, and what numbers those look like, how much money those people are likely to make, what types of work they do. HUD spent a lot of time on that topic. Therefore, you need to be attentive to it. Understand, ask the question, HUD, is it as the crow flies or is it based on certain driving directions as we determine how to pick up that 5,000? Next, HUD says they will issue guidance in dealing with multiple funding sources on community development funding. This is the only thing that I have all capped on this whole thing. Why? This is a major, major concern. As I stated a few moments ago, those of you who are doing any redevelopment, or even some of you who don't do redevelopment, if you are, let's say, in the state of Virginia, where everything you do as a, redevelopment and housing authority, that's the way they read, you all touch this money automatically. As housing authorities, you constantly in Virginia are touching these CDBG and home funds at some level. Some of you even administer them. So again, when you have your money touching any of HUD's other community development money, what does it mean to you? What happens? What HUD wrote elsewhere in the document, it said that when you have multiple community development funds, they're both in the same project, the results are only reported to one program office. The example they gave, I believe, was one was home funds, one was CDBG, you go to that program office, or something like that. That's what they're assuming. But they don't describe if you're public housing and you're touching these home funds in your tax credit deal, then who gets reported to? Or, again, do we have both? Am I going to end up still reporting all of my results to public housing, or am I supposed to report incremental results to public housing and then to community development? That's an important issue, and I strongly suggest you all get an answer to that one. Transitioning now, and we're almost there, guys, about 3 slides out, so this isn't very long. I have lots of time for questions. HUD is eliminating the separate, and these are their words, not mine, the separate extensive complaint and compliance review process. HUD is eliminating the separate extensive complaint and compliance review process. What does that mean? It means the HUD Form 958 complaint process is out. You didn't read it in this document anywhere. I can tell you I read it and read it and read it. I sat on a plane last night going back through it again because I said, there's no way, I must have just missed it. Nope, it is not there. There is that, ladies and gentlemen, is no complaint process prescribed in here. What it says is the program office to handle Section 3 compliance oversight into their regular oversight. So they're going to blend it. So if the public housing engineer, let's say, happens to be doing an oversight of some of your capital fund stuff, they're supposed to automatically consider Section 3 as part of that. Some of you, I know some of you have already witnessed your auditors not only asking you, did you file your 60,002? They're actually asking you to prove it, to show them the backup, not just the report itself. They want you to see the backup to that stuff. So you can't just put a bunch of numbers on inside Spears and say, yay, we're done. Nope, no more. You have to prove what those numbers were. So whatever the support documentation is, they're looking for it. Consider it this way, folks. For those of you who work in and around accounting, when the auditor says, I have this check that was written to Motivation Inc. for $20,000 on January 1st, I need the backup to it. And what are they looking for? They're looking for all of your procurement and da-da-da-da-da-da. That's what this is turning into. So the game is changing. And because your rep, your housing authority rep, is right, in some cases, down the street from you, but certainly closer to you than the folks at FHEO in D.C., they now have closer and easier access to get to you. So to that end, last bullet point on the page, FHEO, Fair Housing Equal Opportunity, will no longer handle any Section 3 compliance, as HUD will remove the delegation of oversight of Section 3 by the Assistant Secretary over FHEO. That delegation has been there for as long as I know. The Secretary delegated all Section 3 to the FHEO Assistant Director or Secretary, and they're saying, no, we're going to remove that because we don't want Section 3 based out of D.C. Section 3 should never be in D.C. That's not the right place to have enforcement. Well, okay, I don't argue that. I've always said that that was a bad idea. I've often said Section 3 compliant, if you will, technical assistance, and Section 3 enforcement should never be in the very same office because it's really hard to have to turn to the person who's going to get you in trouble for your failure to comply and ask for assistance on how to better apply. Apply these applications to better comply. You can't do it. It just never worked. So I've always said they need to be in two different places. However, to not prescribe a complaint process, to then leave that process up to the program office for them to deal with and address is a very different shift. And that means compliance oversight is now closer to home than ever before. Please remember that, guys. Think about your comments on that and think about how you feel about it. I'm not suggesting any of your HUD reps are bad people, but this means that your Section 3 everything has to be cleaner and it has to be better because that means someone's looking over your shoulder. It's going to be very different. There's also a piece missing. I'll just drop this in as an aside for you all. The current interim rule states that once your report has been submitted to HUD, it becomes public. That doesn't exist anywhere in here, in either of these two documents. So again, I don't really know what that looks like. We'll see here in a moment. We'll talk about it in just a few. Now let's talk about benchmarks. Benchmarks are from the second document that HUD issued. Again, the second document was a separate document because it gives HUD and affords them the opportunity, as it says in the lower right-hand corner of your slide, to change these not less than every 5 years by publication in the Federal Register. So they can change these benchmarks. These benchmarks are your safe harbor. This is safe harbor. But remember, they're asking you about these two alternatives again. So for public housing assistance and community development fiscal year or by project, alternative 1, Section 3 labor hours must equal 25% of the total labor hours for all of your work. And targeted Section 3 labor hours must equal 5% of the total labor hours for all of your work, inclusive for public Indian housing, inclusive of small contracts for all of you, for all of your staff hours as well. Alternative 2, public housing assistance or other recipients based on fiscal year 30% of the total new hires for Section 3 workers. 30% of the total new hires, and then 5% of the total Section 3 new hires would then have to be targeted Section 3 people. 5% would have to be targeted. Someone's asked me, and I'm willing to bet you if I were to go through these questions, someone's probably asked me, Keith, which one do you think is best? Honestly, neither of them. I think that HUD, and by the way, these are in my proposed comments that I already have written to HUD. I think, honestly, on your behalf and for the beneficiaries, I think HUD missed the mark. Oh gosh, I give them absolute AA plus for effort. I think they've done as best anybody could do based on the people in the room. But they missed the entire intent of Section 3 by this rule. Hours worked, and if I'm wrong, I will look here at the comments. If I'm wrong, you write it in, you tell me. Hours worked are not an indicator of self-sufficiency, of economic self-sufficiency. There are a lot of very, very low-income people who work a lot, 2, 3 jobs in many cases, who cannot still make ends meet. So hours worked have no direct impact to self-sufficiency. Certainly we know number of new hires does not either. That's been a game since day one. I've said to everybody in every one of my trainings, whoever wrote that was giving everybody a pass. And I want you to go all the way back to 1966 when the rule was actually conceived. Remember, the first rule was written in 1966, didn't pass until 1968, amended last in 1994. But the world was different in 1966, and what they were doing was they were giving contractors a pass so that they could come into these black communities and still not hire black people. I hate to be that guy, but God is my witness, and I will not lie in his presence. That's the truth, because you can manipulate, as HUD itself states multiple times in the proposed rule. It is completely manipulatable by this new hire rule. So again, I think they're both off base. Reporting and other notes. Reporting will be done with other processes, as I've mentioned. So when you're doing your annual plan, for instance, in public housing, your CAPER in community development, you will then submit your report somehow. What that report is, by the way, we do not know. HUD is looking into other reporting, into another or different system other than Spears. That was big. You didn't care. Keith Swiney sure does. I've been trying to sell them the use of my software for years. I mean, boy, we make Spears look like Spears. We track everything. Hours worked, gross pay, dollars paid, you name it. We believe, and I'm saying this for the record, clear and honest disclosure, we believe there is a better way to do Section 3 that streamlines the process and that is more fair to the recipient as well as to the beneficiaries. And it is not this way, in my opinion. Recipients, third bullet, contract language will be the Section 3 to include Section 3 wording in every contract. What it does not say is the Section 3 clause. The term Section 3 clause does not exist anywhere. What it says is very clearly that you will add some language into every contract. Next, there is no life term spelled out for Section 3 workers or businesses. It never says anywhere how long they survive as a Section 3 business or Section 3 worker. I am to assume, which is really bad, that assuming that they continue to meet whatever those requirements are as a definition, they survive forever. If that's not the right answer, you need to ask questions and or comments about that to HUD. Again, none of these notices were posted to the HUD listserv. I'm poking egg in people's faces at this point. I think that's sad. I mean, why in the world does HUD encourage you to sign up for listserv so that you can remain informed? And the biggest thing to hit Section 3 since June 30, 1994, never hit the listserv. Not good. Personal opinion. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's your time to join the show. Let's see what we have here. As promised, and I don't know what you see, but I'm going to scroll back up. I'm going to pass up all my good mornings. All right, folks down in Noonan, I love you. I assume Sandra Stroger is still there, maybe. If she is, tell her Keith said hello. All right, guys. So, oh, my lovely folks in Fresno, love you. Let's see. I know I got questions coming. Oh, yeah. Bear with me. A lot of stuff to scroll through. In reference to the $200,000 threshold, does project mean by AMP? Oh, great question. Or by construction project? Yeah, the proposed rule doesn't actually define it, but because that rule does not apply to public housing, it is very clear it is by construction project. This, again, I think is a simple oversight, but it's an oversight nonetheless. And this is what happens when we get in a room and we start throwing around jargon as opposed to clear language. The word should be contract, not project. I will tell you that's where a lot of the difficulty and confusion came from. So for the record, it does not apply to any of your AMPs at all, just so you know. You have, again, undefined, but I've been told clearly by a HUD source close to this thing that it is, public housing still maintains a $0 threshold for everything you do. All right, it says, please explain applicability to project-based Section 8. Oh, great question. So everything that applies to public housing applies to project-based Section 8 property. They are essentially treating you both the same. They're saying if you're a public housing or if you are a PBR type, assisted project, you're all one and the same. You all have to still meet all of these requirements. Now, that's a really big deal. What you may not know, again, I'm Mr. Nerd guy on this stuff, is if you look at the HUD project-based Section 8 assisted project list, you are talking roughly 18,000 properties. 18,000 separate recipients, and there's only roughly just under 3,000 public housing. So the implication to the project-based world is phenomenal. No one in the country celebrated that but Keith Swiney, because that's a whole new market that's finally coming into play for us, because they didn't restrict it just to the project-based owned by public housing. That's covering all of them. Yay for me. Mr. Miles, good morning from New York City's Department of Small Business Services. Mr. Miles, you're a guy that I should have met on one of my many trips to New York. All right, it says, did you say, this is from Gwen, did you say you would be providing a copy of your presentation? Yes, I absolutely did state that at the outset. A copy of the presentation will be made available by email to everyone who is registered, and we'll try to bank it somewhere. We will probably stick it into a category. Thank you, Andre, for answering that. So when you see Keith Swiney's answer, that's actually Andre answering for me. Thank you, brother. Mr. Shakir. All right, so will you be updating your Section 3 manual, and if so, when, and will we need to be recertified? Well, that's parts 1 and 2. So Nasheed, number 1, good morning. Number 2, the short answer is absolutely. When we get a final rule, before we offer our very first training, everything that you currently have has to change based on this rule. And so if you should choose to be certified, again, that would be highly recommended, and the answer is yes. So again, I talked about all those proposed 5 geographical locations, cities that we will be planning to come to, and that will, of course, come out and be broadcast to everyone and put on our website as well. All right, Keith, my friend Caitlin. All right. If you've written our Section 3 policy and forms, and this new rule is finalized, as it probably will be, that's right, will you revive these policies? That's a great question. So that question comes directly to me, so you all know, and that's from my client. If I have, within the last 24 months, sorry guys, there had to be a cutoff for everything, but within the last 24 months, if Motivation Inc. wrote your policies absolutely, I will be replacing those at zero cost to you all. That was either stated in your proposal or verbally, but I am a man of my word. We absolutely will. And so that you know, Ms. Caitlin and all of the rest of you, all of the proposals that we have submitted and written on your behalf are all in date order, so I know exactly where the cutoff is, so don't try to get over on me. All right, next. Will you be sending out the slides after the webinar? I think I've answered that. Thank you. Well, Brooklyn. All right, so Mr. Woods from Brooklyn is asking what impact that these changes have on any, I assume the question is RAD, R-A-D, but it came in as a G, development. Brother, Mr. Woods, you're the first one to ask that question. I thought it was going to come up this morning, did not. So here's the short answer. HUD doesn't tell us. HUD does not tell us. I haven't gone back to every one of these stipulated additional Federal Register entries that HUD has listed here. I think I counted some 15, 16 of them, whatever. Nowhere inside the document do they use the word RAD, or Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. I will, and I think it's important that someone get an answer to that question. Right now, under the RAD rule, Section 3 applies until the end of all of the improvements that have been specified under your CHAPS, meaning what you were approved to do, that redevelopment or improvement list, whatever it was. Once they were done, Section 3 ends for you at that level under public housing. Now, however, everyone, and Ezekiel, however, under this rule, you would then get picked up if you convert it to a project-based Section 8 property, which is what RAD does. RAD converts you to a project-based model. Then you would get picked up again and still would have these same requirements of having to meet whatever the alternative 1 or alternative 2 is that HUD lands on for hours worked or for number of employees for new hires. And I would have to tell you that's a sad day for some of you because many people converted thinking they were getting away from Section 3. Sorry, didn't happen. Thank you again for answering that question. All right, Toya Tucker says, total staff hours for Section 3 employees is currently optional along with aggregate number of staff hours worked on the SPEARS reporting system. So this is now changed. Yeah, it is. So that is a very great question, actually, Toya. That's an amazingly great question. Here's the deal. Those two columns, columns D and E, if memory serves correct, and they do. HUD said to me a long, long time ago, one of the senior HUD staff said they couldn't figure out how to write that code right to get those calculations to report properly. I can tell you, and this is no lie, I spent $500,000 to figure out how to write that code and to get it right. The calculations on hours worked versus staff hours and then trainees in D&E column were very, very challenging code to write. And it took a very long time for us to get it right. And so HUD made it optional. That would change. But here's what else, Toya, that you didn't know. When HUD issued its Federal Register notice for comments that it was making a change, it last December 21st, if memory serves correctly. It was just before Christmas. Again, this never came out publicly, so either you knew it or you didn't. One of the things HUD indicated is that they were renewing the number on the 60,002 report. I said at the time, in writing to many people, the 60,002 report would have to change. And I believed that in those two areas that HUD put out, the 958 complaint register and 60,002, that they were both designed to eliminate both forms. And as you can see, I guess I turned out to be right for once in my life because nothing in this current proposed rule ties into what you see in SPEARS any longer. So you're right, Toya. The change is there. All right. Thank you, Jackie, saying pronounced Jackie. I appreciate that. Please include questions and responses in PowerPoint. Yes, we will do our very best. Andre, please make note of that. I know we talked about this, but I'm not certain. Xavier asked us to include the questions, and I think you said that was doable, you or Jeremy, so I'll let you guys, you're the experts, I'm not, but we'll do our best, Mr. Xavier.
Yes,
Can businesses self-certify? Okay, thank you, friend. Can businesses self-certify income, or will HUD require documentation? It is a self-certification process, and not part of it. Nowhere in the document does it say any actual verification was required. It doesn't actually say much other than it's a self-certification process, which is good, by the way. To some extent, it is good that it's still self-certification, but unfortunately, based on the criteria of what makes a Section 3 business definition, you're going to have to do some work. You don't really have a choice. Let me see if I can pull it up. Here we go. So the 51% owned by low or very low income person, you need to have some verification of what that looks like, who owns this business. So you're going to have to look at the very least, their incorporation documents. I would add on my form, whatever form that you would use, I would add a question or a statement that says, list all additional owners and their percentages, because if they get caught lying to you, then that's going to be a federal offense. So I would ask that. And then the over 75% labor hours, well, you've got to look at a lot of something to get that. You have to look at all those hours. I mean, you have a lot of work to do to even confirm that they have this. But what? How do I take a new business or starting fresh? How do I look at that to determine? That's almost a after a project kind of event. Somebody has to do something unless they can prove to you coming in on the day that this gets finalized that they have this, that they meet the 75% of all the labor hours. So that's a challenge. And then owned at least 25% by current public housing resident. Well, the fact that they're public housing is easy. You'll know that if they're yours. Or you just get verification. It speaks to that in the rule. But you still need to look at the ownership structure, and I think it's important to ask them a question, are there any other owners in it, so what percentage? Okay. I would also ask you to consider something else in that question, Patrick. Patrick, I would suggest that you would also ask them to define whether those owners are, profit participants or shareholder participants, because both, I think, would impact this 25% as well as the 51%. You all know as well as I do, there are people who have helped you out a little bit, and they're picking up part of the profit in the back, but they don't own any part of the business. Again, I would be careful. Felicia, no, the 200,000 threshold does not apply to public and Indian housing. I've been told, again, it doesn't specifically say that, but I suspect somebody's already written it down to ask the question. All right, here we go. Harold. Harold asked, if we have 247 public housing units and 15 MHDC units, Missouri Housing Development Commission, are these tax credit units, is what they sound like to me. I could be wrong, but it's something along that line, I assume, if it's coming through the state allocating agency. Harold, if I'm wrong, we'll talk about it. Are we still excluded, or since we manage them, does it throw us over the 250 threshold to be exempt? Boy, wouldn't that suck if it did. I don't think so. So to be clear, it's based on your ACC units. Again, the rule doesn't spell that out as clearly as I believe it should, but it does spell it out well enough that I think it's quite understandable that if you are under 247 public housing assisted units, and that's what the wording says, public housing assisted, therefore I think you're okay. Now, if, however, I'm wrong, and that 15 units out of the Missouri Housing Development Commission are somehow ACC supported but through the state, guess who's back in, right? So give that some thought, Harold, and I hope it works out well for you. By the way, feel free, shoot me an email and let me know how that turns out for you, because I do really want to know if those are tax credit units or not. Wasn't the Section 3 language removed from the definition in Section 8? All right, big baby. I like that question. So let's talk about it and let's be honest. Miss Dina, I'm assuming it is pronounced. I don't think it's Dinah, but it could be. All right, so wasn't the Section 3 regulation removed from the definitions in Section 8? Well, the short answer is yeah. It hadn't been clearly applicable to you all, but the assumption had always been there that it covered project-based Section 8 assisted housing. So that's always been there. I think there had been some ambiguity, but I actually went to Rafiq, I was going to say early 2 years ago, I would actually believe. And I actually sent an email to him and said, hey, would you clarify this? Even though I knew the answer, if it isn't in writing and you can't show it to people, they won't believe. So we had to make some believers. So yeah, but irregardless of that, if this rule passes as written, the Section 8's in regardless. What's out, ladies and gentlemen, and I tried not to pick a fight earlier, but I'm going to start it now. I didn't want to pick it with that group, but I'll pick it with you all. I knew the question was going to come up. Who really gets taken advantage of in this process are the Section 8 tenant-based vouchers. The Housing Choice Voucher Program voucher holders are completely exempt in every part of this. They are just not a part of it. And one of the questions HUD does ask is should those Housing Choice Voucher people be considered back in as Section 3? And the answer is absolutely, I believe, yes, but you'll give them your answer. When do you expect HUD to publish the final rule? Hello, Miss Hannah. Hannah, you know, the short answer is if all holds true, I think we'll have it certainly long before Thanksgiving. I know that had been a goal a year ago and for whatever reason got pushed, but I would still say we would have it before Thanksgiving. Keep in mind, comments close June 3rd. HUD then has an opportunity to look at those and review them, and depending upon how many they get and whether they're in form letter style or not, I think they'll decide how they're going to review them. But Hannah, let me throw something in on top of your question that no one has asked yet, and I was really kind of ambivalent about getting into because it almost seems like I'm trying to throw stones, and I'm not. So that you all are aware. Remember, there are two parts to this, the benchmark and then the rule itself. In the rule itself, it says comments are only viewable by making an appointment, going to Washington, D.C., to the headquarters building to view them. So unlike in the past, where all comments that are issued in the portal at the Federal Register are also viewable, so you could see everyone else's comments. They're not doing that with this part of the rule. With the benchmark part of the rule, just a separate benchmark, the answer or the comments will be viewable through the portal. Somebody might want to comment on that. I think that's a problem. I already answered that. Any chance of training in Philadelphia, New York, D.C. area? There's always a chance, Chrissy, that I could train in the Philly, New York, or D.C. area. Man, I can't tell you, Mrs. Brown, who's somewhere on this call and webinar, she can attest to the number of times. Tyree Stanback can. John Johnson can. I think a number of the folks in New York can tell you, I've been trying for years to put together something intelligent in New York. But I do want to make sure you understand something. When I put in Rhode Island as an option, the purpose for that was not just because I like Rhode Island. The truth of the matter is I've only been to Rhode Island once in my life. But according to the most recent census data, I can cover 25% of all the human beings in the United States within a 500-mile radius of Providence, Rhode Island. So if I'm right there in Providence, I can pick up all of you guys pretty quickly. Is that the right location? I don't know. But coming to New York, depending upon time of year, can be very expensive for people. But last thought, Chrissy, we do a lot of partner trainings, meaning that we have a host who says, Keith, I have a facility. We'd love to have you come here and do the training here, and people come in. We've done it all over the country. The folks out in Fresno will tell you that because I've been there at least twice. We've done places from coast to coast. So if you folks around the country say we would love to host an event and we have a decent professional training room that has lodging nearby and lots of stuff for people to do, those things are important when people travel. If you do, you send me an email and I'll absolutely look at it. Miles Gamble. He says, Mr. Swiney, how would the goals be defined under the new rule? It was 30%. hire, 10% construction, non-construction. What would it be now? Sorry, my friend, that changes drastically. There are no contract-specific goals any longer. So the 10% and the 3% are gone. Everything in this rule is driven by either one, alternative one, hours worked by low and very low income people, including those who are Section 8 in a project-based environment, or, and of course youth build, let me leave those folks out, or they're going to go back to the 30% new hires. But nowhere in either of those alternatives, Miles, do they give any contracting data. I think that's a bad idea if anybody wants to know. I think that as a recipient, you should be given credit for the percentage of contracts that are Section 3 that you are writing checks to every month. I think you should be given credit for all of the Section 3 dollars, those payroll dollars that are being paid out every month to Section 3 people. And more importantly, which nowhere in this document does it talk about, don't get me excited now, it doesn't talk about the training component. If you don't have an educated and trained and ready workforce, these goals that you see here on the paper for Section 3 businesses, I've left it here for a reason. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen, guys. Successes and failure rates would be pretty much out of whack. You would have so many failures. So training is something that as you invest in it, I think it should become part of the metric so that you know when you read my comments, and I know many of you will, that's what I propose to HUD, that they go to a trimetric system as opposed to the dual system they're looking at. I think we were going until 11:30. I sure hope I'm right about that because I'm going to talk until 11:30. If you have to drop off, have a great day, guys. Next, I had to step away. Did you say whether the 250 unit threshold you mentioned earlier on in the presentation could be RAD units? I did not. It does not speak anything about your unit count under RAD. It specifically only includes your public housing units. It specifically does not talk about tax credits in any way at any time. It's only your public housing assisted units that have to beat that 250 or below 250. All right. Sharon, I believe, Sharon or Sharon, I hope with the 2 R's I do it right, Ms. Mays. What happens when you cannot get the residents to participate in Section 3 to be in compliance of number of new hires? My friend, Ms. Mays, let me tell you, your question goes a little deeper than that. Everything in this entire rule is driven around one thing. And it's one premise and one premise only, and clearly you picked it up. It's whether or not I have motivated, active, engaged, up every day, working residents. Because if you don't, you're still at zero. And what happens if? I can't tell you because, again, all of that oversight, including any sanctions, I guess, that may be applied, would have to come from your program office over public housing. And here's what you should know. Inside the document, HUD does make clear that these benchmarks that are listed, these benchmarks may change. Every 3 to 5 years, HUD says we may be changing these benchmarks. So as they change those benchmarks, I assume it's going to be based on the results of the prior 5-year period. So if you're having a difficult time getting your residents engaged, and they give you no credit for training, I don't know how you're going to get there. Your question is phenomenally great, Ms. Mays. Thank you for it. Folks, that's something that you all need to really comment back to HUD on. Remember, and I'm not selling it, I just think it makes sense from 22 years of on the ground doing this, and if I didn't mention it, I've run public housing for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, you need credit for all the things that go into Section 3, and that includes Section 3 contract dollars. That does include your training dollars, and it absolutely positively includes all the dollars that are paid out in payroll by you and your contractors to Section 3 people. At least there you have a mix in your metrics. Does it still rely on the very same premise that you have to have ready, willing, able, functioning residents? Yes. However, I bet I can tell you something you don't know. On all of the projects that we've done compliance management on, and I mean big construction and small routine. Do you know, and I am not making this up, roughly 90% of all of the people, the Section 3 people, have all been Tier 2. Under the current rule, Tier 2 are all the other people, non-HUD assisted with their rent, the people in the community. 90% of all the activity, all the money paid, was not to your residents. Training is going to be a big part of this. If you don't have it and you don't do it, you're in trouble. Yes, Ms. Lori, could you provide upcoming trainings in email? I would like to attend. Yes, that will be coming out. You are now on my list. Okay, Ms. Toya again. I have 3 outstanding, I'm at 11:30. I'm going to answer these last 2 questions and I'll let you go, guys. I have 3 outstanding reports to do, 2016, 17, and 18. For reasons beyond my control, do I have to incorporate new changes on these reports? I already foresee that trying to calculate those hours worked as being a problem. Oh, you don't have a clue, my friend. On outstanding reports, as well as future reports. My goodness indeed, girl, fall on your knees. You're going to need all the prayer you can get. The short answer is this. HUD scrubbed all the old reports off the system anyway. Spears had some real difficulty. They couldn't get the data to calculate. I do not know why they couldn't do it. We actually asked them, we offered them to let us do it, and they said, no, thank you. We would have put it in our system and knocked it right out. However, they couldn't. So right now, here's what I'm going to tell you. Get done what you can get done under the old system because that's what was in place at the time. Don't worry about the new because none of this that we see in front of us right now may ever come to fruition. Focus on the old. If you need help, you call me. I'll be happy to walk you through it any way I can. Okay? Last question, Ms. Hannah, how appropriate. Can you please clarify where, I assume that's the proposed rule states Section 3 applies to PBV. All Section 8 assisted properties, all it says. Those are all of them, Hannah. And it's in there in multiple places. I'm sorry, they didn't list this and denote it the way I'm used to, so I can't just point directly to it. If I'm wrong, again, here's what I'm going to say you do. You go ahead and you send a question up there. For each of the program people who participated, it tells you. So for Public and Indian Housing, it's Marie. Lovely, lovely woman. Some of you may have met her in Dallas in June last year in Dallas at the HUD's training. Amazing person, really nice. She's very helpful. Send her a question, get clarity. When you get the clarity, you send it to me. So if my read on what they've written is wrong, you tell me, and then I'll make sure everybody knows it in my training. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. It's lunchtime for everybody. I have community development coming back, I believe, at 1:30 this afternoon. I hope I'm right on the time. Am I right? Somebody on my team, we were supposed to go until 11:30. Am I correct? Or was it 11:45? Because if it is, I love to talk. You know that. Is it 11:30, Andre?
Yes, but you're the boss.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, no. You know, listen. I'll continue to scroll for questions. If anyone wants to sit here, I'll go another few minutes until I can clear as many as I can because I'm going nowhere, you know. I'm working from home today. All I got to do is walk 5 feet and make a bologna sandwich. If any of you need to drop off, I'll certainly understand it. It's okay because I know it's lunchtime. Here we go. Nathan Bragg. Nathan says, how does the new final rule affect Section 3 in community demographics? More specifically, can a PHA go to a larger community outside of its own PHA demographics? Example of this would be a citywide to Section 3 consortium with multiple PHAs involved. Are there limiting restrictions in the new final rule versus the old rules? Man, I love you, Nathan. Whoever you are and wherever in the world you are, holla at your boy. This is an amazingly good question. I had the same question. In the current rule right now, it isn't actually written, but in the interim rule today, and HUD has given much guidance to this. Stacey Gillian did. Rafiq has talked about this. I don't know if I heard it come out of Bruce's mouth, but maybe, so don't let me lie on Bruce. But the issue of making certain that your Section 3 policy meets what's best for your community. That's what Stacey Gillian, as the former director, always said. That every individual recipient should have the right to institute a set of policies. One of those policies that came out way back in around 2010. This was after stimulus, but it was 2010, 11, 12, I think it really got big after HUD issued its first Section 3 coordinator, and only to this date, grant $50,000 to 12 recipients around the country. It was made clear in many of them, and I will identify for you one that I know of for sure, or two. The city of Alameda, California, one of our clients, when we wrote their Section 3 policy, we literally wrote that thing, if I remember correctly, all the way from the San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, if you will, and we went, I think, as far as Santa Rosa, because that is a very wealthy area, especially as you go through Marin County and that sort of thing. And it is a very expensive place, so capturing enough low and very low income people, we had to broaden that. So the folks up in Norfolk, Virginia, Linda Davenport, amazing human being. If you get by that part of the world, you stop and have dinner with her. Linda and her team took the entire Hampton Roads community up and down that interstate and basically said, listen, all of this is one big community. Yes, we have multiple recipients. So when she wrote her documents are shared with everybody, and everybody kicks back and says, hey, I'm looking at these self-certifications. Can you handle that? She manages it. So having a consortium, having a jurisdiction, I'll call it, wider region than just the restricted area, I think does have a lot of value. Now, it's important to note, though, Nathan, that we are giving preference to those people who are closest to the point of expenditure, right there at that property, in that neighborhood, in that community. In answer to your question, it does not say that in the proposed final rule. That is something that in your comments you need to make very clear. Some of you, in fact, many of you, I suspect, need to do that. Now, that actually ties into the community development 1 mile radius, 5,000 people thing. I believe that's where HUD was trying to go. It just came out a little more confusing. Whenever, and I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek because I'm good for this, right? Because that's why I'm making this joke. Whenever you look at a federal regulation and it's starting to use diagrams, you're probably in trouble, And I'm starting to look at these circles and I'm like, what am I looking at? So be careful, guys. But yes, Nathan, that is really great. I don't know how deep they're going to go, so please ask the question and let's see if we can get this back to the reality that even a public housing entity, in many cases, needs to partner with these other entities to be successful. And by the way, it makes a lot of sense. The sharing of resources in a local or regional area is also good to help build a good group of ready Section 3 people, for employment. Okay, as we prepare for our comments, thank you. Signing off. Thank you, Nicole. Sorry you're gone. Will these new rules apply to the 2019 Section 3 report? Ooh. Wow, that's an amazing question. The short answer is it should not. This rule won't apply to anything until the day in which HUD finalizes it. So for right now, it is business as usual. Ms. Hannah, do you know if we will use the interim rule until contracts, or if we need to modify outstanding contracts when the final rule is published? Listen, I don't care what you say. Hannah Kroner is one of the smartest doggone people I know. Hannah, up in DC Housing. Hannah, your question is really good. I had a conversation on this at the HUD office a year ago, and I think the short answer is there has to be a transition period. So this is what makes this whole thing so interesting. Having nothing to do specifically with the proposed rule, HUD's going to have to issue a PIH notice at some point which says, here's how all you public housing folks are going to manage this transition. Because for some period of time, there's going to either be an old system, Steel and Spears or somewhere, that you're reporting current data on, and then there's going to be new systems. So to speak a little clearer to that, I asked the question because I also needed to know about what the dividing line is. And let me give you an example. For all of you all who are doing new construction projects, it's spring. So many of you, I know, got your tax credit allocations now, or you're looking to close your financing. April and May and June are huge months for closing financial transactions, and certainly for those of you who are going to be pushing even to the fall, all of this applies. Your project, as it were, on paper, your project that you submitted to the tax credit allocating agencies in particular. I'm not talking even about you folks who have bond issues that are structured right now, because we know those are at risk, but for your tax credit deals as well. As you know, all of your qualified, okay, I'm about to do it. I said I wasn't going to, and I was doing so well. All your qualified bases, you're like, what is he talking about? Okay, all the stuff that goes into making your project work, whether it's hard costs or soft costs, all of those numbers have probably gone hard already, meaning they're all firm, they're locked up. Your pro forma is now a go. That project, ladies and gentlemen, teed up years before this proposed rule was ever even thought of in some cases. If HUD drastically changes the rule around Section 3, it has a real potential for affecting those deals. Now, if you remember what I said about myself, I wasn't boasting. I was telling you I'm a development guy at my core. I've been doing tax credit deals since the inception of the program. I did some of the first projects that came out in 1987 and 88. I was a senior portfolio manager for the National Equities Fund. I know these deals, and they're at risk. So, Hannah, your question is much broader. You all are going to have to submit these comments to HUD, and some of them are going to be questions. And I highly recommend, rather than just submitting your comments and questions together, send the questions early. Call Marie, for instance, in the public housing, whatever. Let me see if I can get her information accurately. It's right there. It's at the top of this thing. I don't know if I have it. I have her card somewhere. But anyway, Marie is your contact. You need to reach out to her and get these questions answered. Why? Because in the event that there's a drastic financial shift, guess who's going to end up eating it out of their developer fee portion? You all are. Be careful. Yes, all other existing contracts, I assume, and again, we haven't seen that until they renew or cancel and have to be rebid, they would all be under this old system. So somewhere in this process, HUD has to figure out a way of managing the old plus the new requirements and being able to report both simultaneously. And that I am aware of. Our software is the only one in the nation that does that. Okay, what time is it, Mr. Swiney? It is 11:42. I will go to 11:45, I promise. Michelle, there she is. Hello. Will contractors who are Section 3 claimed still be given a preference in contractors' awards? Under the current system? Because you said are Section 3 claimed still, meaning that they are today, will they still? And if that's the answer or the question, the answer is no, because the definition of a Section 3 business doesn't exist right now. So those people, for the current contract that they may be on right now or until this gets finalized, they're good. But once this gets finalized, every new Section 3 business will be under the new definition. It won't be these any longer. And therefore, if you'll look at your screen, Michelle, if you're still with us, you'll see these are the new definitions. They have nothing to do with the definitions we currently have. The 30% employment rule, the 51% is here, but it's not even the same rule. The current rule says 51% owned and operated by, and then it tiers differently than this does, and then the 25% sub-award, which has always been a joke, but okay. So, yeah, Michelle, you've got to start from scratch. Everything that you've once done starts over again. This means work. And I haven't said it yet, and I hope that many of you haven't broken for lunch yet, so I'm going to leave you with it. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to break off some coin. I don't care how you look at it. You are about to break off some real money, whether you are having to hire more staff, whether you are having to contract and outsource this, you're going to have to figure it out. Because just as one of the participants pointed out, the counting of hours is substantially different than the counting of bodies. And tracking all of those hours and how they come in and ensuring that you have an accurate count. Now remember this last thing. It says, listen, for these small contractors, remember what I said, they don't even have to provide you currently an accurate number. They can do basically a best guess and say, here's our assumption, here's what I think we did. So your number still may be off a bit, and I don't like that. I like definites. I don't like, in the world of compliance, I think I did is unacceptable. So you all have to figure this part out. All right. Last one, Ms. Tucker, this is yours. I got to go, guys. We made a training fund out of the money that is received from contractors that are found non-compliant. Oh, you said that right for me for once, with their Section 3 requirements. And now we don't get any credit for training residents? Yeah, you ought to be mad about that. Well, you at least said it right. Thank you so much, Toya. You're right. At least you took the money only as a penalty for noncompliance. You aren't one of these agencies that just takes money from people in violation of the law and the rule. But yeah, you get no training, you get no credit for that. And that, again, as I said earlier, I'll repeat again as I wrap up, that's the missing piece here. I know HUD doesn't want to pay for training, but by golly, you can't get a good Section 3 workforce without solid foundational training. The Department of Labor standards on that, and they're very clear and they have not changed. They said without a solid, good, at a minimum, employment readiness training, people will not survive in their jobs 90 days. In fact, the average employment that they reported last was 90 days only for those folks. And we've seen that in all the trainings that we've done. When you come into our employment readiness training, I can tell you when we look at these folks' applications and resumes, 1 month here, a month or two there, a week over here, I may not have even lasted 2 days at that job. And there is a reason for that. And so without the foundation, people don't have success. So not giving you credit for training, no matter where the money comes from, I think is a failure. So remember those three things I suggested: training dollars, payroll dollars, contract dollars.